I'm going to borrow a favorite segment of Rachel's because today we have a best new thing in the world. Are you ready? Here we go. When President Obama, or really any president that, for that matter, speaks, the video of him that you generally see is what we call the pool cam. So instead of every network and newspaper and website setting up their own cameras at these events, they share the pool camera. It's kind of an efficient solution to providing access for so many people and organizations. And similarly, the press corps covering the president also has a pool report. So instead of every single outlet having a reporter follow the president's every move, there's a rotating group of reporters who take turns writing the pool report. That report is then distributed to all of the news outlets to be used in their coverage. Here's an example of a report from the day of President Obama's leaving for family vacation. Marine One was wheels up for Joint Base Andrew at 5:24 p.m. POTUS walked across the South Lawn with Sasha Obama, and the First Lady walked a few yards behind with Malia. You know, not exactly riveting. But that is the kind of stuff that you generally get from pool reports. And this is what it's like working in the White House press corps. This weekend, however, while covering the first family's trip to Hawaii, Gardner Harris from the New York Times attempted to turn the mundane into the magnificent. And my God, did he succeed. Here's a selection from one of his first reports of the day describing the scene. The water is aquamarine, but the sky is decidedly gray. Think Miami Vice. And that great wordless scene with Phil Collins in The Air Tonight, playing in the background as Crockett and Tubbs drive through the night to confront the bad guys. 10 points for the Miami Vice reference, and he was just getting started. In describing the president's trip to the beach, he veered into a personal story. But beyond the break, the ocean snarls into a sapphire blue, the kind of dark, forbidding color that speaks of great depth and sharp teeth. Your pooler, this is him talking about himself, swam into those depths early this morning under a nearly full moon. About a mile out, the hotel key in your pooler's briefs, oddly folded by a freak wave, created a pinch that felt like a creature's jaws. I think my favorite moment from Mr. Harris's dispatches comes when he's describing the notable absence from the Obama family trip to a local shaved ice shop. Quote, Flotus was not present, as she rarely seems to enjoy publicly eating frozen, garishly colored sugar water with little of the mouth appeal that cream brings. He really wrote mouth appeal. Mr. Harris, for handling his pool duties with such flair, and of flipping through this weekend's press reports into the highlight of the workday. You, sir, are the best new thing in the world. God bless you and your report's incredible mouth appeal. That does it for us. We'll see you again tomorrow. Right now, it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell.
Melissa, the White House press corps is going to miss Hawaii.
Last night, one of the presidential hopefuls had one of those humbling moments that can only happen on the campaign trail. Democratic candidate Martin O'Malley held an event in Iowa, and only one person showed up. His name was Kenneth. And Martin O'Malley, former mayor of Baltimore and former governor of Maryland, spent an entire hour chatting with Kenneth about the issues. At the end, Kenneth was still not ready to commit. Iowa voters, they take their responsibilities seriously. But listen, there was a big snowstorm in Iowa yesterday, and many presidential candidates just canceled their events. Martin O'Malley soldiered through all of his planned stops despite the weather. And it's not like Martin O'Malley is Rick Santorum, who attracted just one supporter at an Iowa event in June when it was definitely not snowing. Governor O'Malley was joined by 5 people at an earlier event yesterday and 12 at another. And honestly, if you can get almost 20 people to brave blowing snow and icy roads to come see you, well, that might just be a win in Iowa. The Iowa caucuses are just 34 days away, and they're a kind of convoluted several-hour process held on a weeknight in the dead of winter. Super devoted supporters can be a bigger asset there than high poll numbers. Which is not to say that anyone expects Martin O'Malley to win Iowa, but on the Republican side of the presidential campaign, this has become a central question. Do the candidates who are doing best in the polls have the infrastructure on the ground to actually pull off wins in the early contests? Donald Trump was asked about this earlier this evening at a press conference that he held on board his plane before an Iowa rally.
Well, as you know, and even if you look tonight, despite the bad weather, the place is packed. They just had it on television. They're showing it's packed. And we get by far the biggest crowds. Now, the question is, will they show up for caucus? I think the answer is yes. As you know, we have Sam Clovis and we have Chuck Loudner, and they have some incredible people under them. But, you know, we're going to see what happens on February 1st. I really think those people, I actually think all of those people, and maybe even friends of theirs that weren't at the rallies or the speeches, I really think they're going to come out and they're going to caucus, and we're going to have a very good victory. But, you know, we're going to have to see.
Now, there have been mixed reports about Donald Trump's ground game in Iowa and in New Hampshire. The New York Times noted last week that his campaign appears to have no pollsters, no advertising team, and no research or voter contact operations. Though we just found out that Mr. Trump did get access to the RNC's enormous voter list, which gives his campaign data on more than 200 million people. If Donald Trump doesn't have a good ground game, and if the old rules of presidential campaigning still apply, it's possible he could suffer a sudden collapse once people actually start voting. But this has been an election season in which all the old rules seem to have gone out the window. Jeb Bush has spent over $38 million on ads only to languish in the single digits. Donald Trump, he has dominated the polls for months, and he's not run a single TV ad. But that may be about to change.
I'll be spending a minimum of $2 million a week and perhaps substantially more than that.
Jeb has spent $40 million, and you get that's
No, he hasn't spent $40 million. He's wasted $40 million. There's a big difference.
So why is it any different for you?
Jeb has wasted $40 million.
What do your ads look like?
Every week in Iowa leading up to February 1st?
So I'm going to be doing big ads in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and they're going to be very substantial, and I think they're very well done. I've seen the first 2 or 3 of them. We're very proud of them. I don't think I need to spend anything, and I'm very proud of the fact that I've spent the least and I have the best result. In other words, I spent here, you look at a guy like Bush, he actually spent $59 million, and he's nowhere. And others likewise, they've spent millions of dollars and they're nowhere. And if anybody goes after me, I will spend a lot of money against the people that go after me.
Donald Trump has said before that he was going to start running ads, and the ads never appeared. But if we are going to get $2 million a week in Trump TV ads, then we are entering a new phase of this election season. Joining us now is MSNBC political correspondent Casey Hunt. It is so nice to have you right here with us tonight.
Lovely to be here, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
So, Donald Trump is not wrong that he has managed perhaps the best free media presidential campaign in modern history. But what would paid media, what would ads look like from him?
Well, I think that that's still an open question at this point. I think the main question is he going to run biographical spots? I mean, if we were looking at this as a normal campaign, we'd divide it up into, hey, am I selling myself or am I trying to contrast with other candidates? I think attack ads from Donald Trump have the potential to be brutal. I think we've seen just Donald Trump's free media attacks, as you call them, be pretty effective already. So I think an actual paid TV spot could potentially be deadly.
Now, a lot is being made of this idea of a ground game, and we started with the kind of Iowa snow, and I'm reminded that Iowa, unlike New Hampshire, it's in part about turnout, but it's also really about what happens in those school gymnasiums, in those spaces. And Trump supporters are the kind of people who strike me as good caucusers.
I think that it's an open question. I would remind you, Republican caucuses are a little bit different in Iowa than Democratic ones. So they still, once they're in the room, they listen to a speech from somebody from the campaign, and then they actually vote by secret ballot. The Democrats have a little bit of a different process.
But as in like pep rally, yes.
More like that, exactly. But that's exactly what the Trump campaign is trying to do. I was out in Cedar Rapids with the Trump campaign a couple of weeks ago, and they have their volunteers going into these gymnasiums, and the real strength is these rallies. The scale of these rallies is in some ways unprecedented. They are not wrong when they say they have thousands of people available to them. The problem is that many of them are really new to this process, and it can be an intimidating process, and it takes a lot of effort. You have to get out of your house on a probably cold, maybe snowy, blizzarding February night, go down to the school gym, sit there, listen to all this stuff. So they're going kind of row by row. They have these volunteers saying, hey, this is what it means to be a caucus captain. This is what it means to show up to caucus at all. The voters that I talked to, most of them, one woman said the last person that she voted for in a caucus was Jimmy Carter.
Oh,
so
my.
That's the scale of effort that the Trump campaign is looking at. And these other Republican campaigns, they know that he's going to bring new voters into this process. They're making that assumption. The question is how many? They don't know. It could be in the thousands. It could be overwhelming, but it also could be many, many fewer. And that's the Trump campaign's hurdle here.
So this is a fascinating idea to me, that the draw of new voters would actually be coming in here on the Republican side. I mean, we heard from Mr. Trump this week a critique of President Clinton, of Bill Clinton. But typically, when we think about somebody who attracts new voters, folks who haven't showed up before, it has happened in general elections around Democrats. Is this kind of conservative populism something relatively new for the party, for the Republican Party?
I think in some ways it's a combination of that populism you talk about. It's also part celebrity. I mean, you run into people at these rallies who say, "Oh, my friend called me. I'm a Rubio supporter," but he said, "Hey, you want to go see Donald Trump?" Of course, I want to go see Donald Trump. Who doesn't want to go
Somebody
see that?
at the rally said they were a Rubio supporter. Come on.
I did find in Iowa you can in fact find people like that. It happens. I'm not sure that this is the same. Some people have compared this to Barack Obama in 2008 in Iowa because people talk a lot about how he brought so many new people in. I think that some of the other sources I've talked to who say that in some ways Ted Cruz's campaign might be more like Obama's, might be more on point, because what Cruz's campaign is trying to do is really activate conservative base voters who've maybe fallen out of the process, and that's something that the Obama campaign did very effectively in Iowa in 2008. I think that a lot of the people who are showing up for Trump are frankly people who haven't been engaged in politics before, and I think we're seeing that across the board, whether it's people who are watching these debates there at sky-high numbers, people who are tuning in. I mean, anecdotally, you go out to lunch and people at the table two tables over are talking about Donald Trump. I mean, that just didn't happen in 2012.
I mean, and again, that's part of why he's accurate in that assessment that he has not had to spend money and yet has that level of kind of discourse around his campaign. Casey, MSNBC political correspondent here live. It's great.
New York City. Thanks, Melissa.
Much more ahead tonight, including what I guarantee you is the greatest piece of archive tape that you have seen in a very long time.